Welcome to the Marketing Remix, presented by Red Door Interactive. I'm Reed Carr, CEO of Red Door Interactive. Our show is a senior-level marketer's resource for navigating our ever-evolving landscape. In each episode, in about 20 minutes, experts from different marketing disciplines representing different buyer touchpoints tackle one important marketing topic. Then, what do you need to know, and how does it affect the buyer? We're here to talk about social listening, using audience insights to guide strategy. Listen before you speak. You've probably heard that a few times in life. And as individuals, we should understand the importance of listening and thoughtful communication. As marketers, we haven't always had the strategies or tools to do so, at least at scale. Enter social listening, which allows you to track, analyze, and respond to conversations about your brand and industry online in real time. In this episode, we explore social listening, its impact on audience research, ways to incorporate the tactic into your social media strategy, and more. We're here with Will Price, Manager of Content Strategy, and Allie Franklin, Business Supervisor here from Red Door. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so quick level set with the audience. What's the difference between social media listening and social media monitoring?
Sure. So off the bat, the two words sound somewhat synonymous, but there's a lot of disparities between the two and how we approach them from a strategic perspective. Social media monitoring is where you're kind of just seeing what the conversation looks like. It's just happening. You log in the morning and you see that some people are talking about your brand in this way, and some people are talking about your brand in this way, and another audience is not talking about your brand at all. And then you just kind of say, cool, thank you, next. Time for something else.
Way to bring in the Ariana Grande in there.
It's like every pitch I've done for the last year. But you take a deeper dive into social media listening, and this is really where the data starts to pop. And it's where you start to understand what the conversations look like and turn that data into actionable insights and into strategy. So before, when you're just monitoring conversations saying, this person hates me, this person likes me, next, you go into this person hates me because, and you take a deep dive down that way to figure out ways that you can maybe turn their sentiment from negative to positive. And this person loves me because, and I can expand on this sentiment, this positive sentiment, to grow that further for my brand.
So the difference is that in one case, you're actively listening so you can take action. The other one is I'm just passively checking it out so I kind of have a sense of how things are going.
Yeah, it's reaction versus proaction.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice. All right, well, so what are some of the fundamental ways social listening can benefit a brand? Allie, you kind of represent a lot of times on our client side the voice of the brand to certainly within the agency, but how is this social listening benefiting them from their standpoint?
Yeah, I think the cool part about social listening is that if you incorporate it early enough into a campaign or a program, it just allows you to be that much more relevant in your messaging. It means you're listening to your audience and you're developing a strategy or a piece of creative or even just an overall program that's responding to their needs and based on their conversation. So I think brands should be incorporating social listening early and frequently, because it's not just a set it and forget it. It's use it to inform your marketing and your program, but then use it to gauge success. Use it to understand how your audience is responding. Are they responding favorably? Are they really digging your message and what you're putting out there? Or, are you getting some real negativity out there? That allows you to then refine and adjust and really make the most of your media dollars. I think that's where the benefit really comes in, is you're not just launching a massive media program and then looking at it in a year and hoping it did well and then saying, oh my God, it was not doing well. It's kind of the new form of reporting and KPI that we can do on an ongoing basis to help optimize.
Yeah. So would you say then, actually, Will, this is for you. What's the consumer expectation here? I mean, are they assuming that we're listening to them from I imagine it depends on the brand to a degree, like how big the brand is, but is there an expectation at this point?
I think it varies from brand to brand, but it also varies from demographic to demographic, because I feel like the 65-year-old mom on Facebook might not think that the brand is listening to her in the same way that a 25-year-old on Instagram knows that a brand is listening to her or him. So I think expectation is kind of all over the place, but that's the great thing about social listening is that you can start to pinpoint what those demographics and audiences actually look like. So you can start to get into their lives a little bit more in authentic ways, not in inauthentic ways. And there's this sentiment, there's this saying that's going around about how brands aren't competing with other brands anymore when it comes to getting their messages out there. They're competing with other people. So the glut of content out there shows you that brands need to be proactive, like Ali was saying, and getting early into the social listening as it pertains to your strategy, because you're missing out on what the conversation actually is organically versus just saying like, buy our shoes. It's, the 13 other things people are talking about before they even make the decision to look at your website.
Yeah.
So I think
if a brand doesn't respond to the way an audience is talking about them, they almost get called out even further, and it can just keep getting worse because it shows that they're so out of touch with their audience.
They seem out of touch. Exactly. And that's wild is now the expectation is, but before you could just be the brand, say what you wanted to say and kind of sit back and not necessarily maybe realize you are out of touch in that regard. But now you have that feedback loop if you're actually using the feedback loop, which would require then you have to prepare to do all of this stuff, and to prepare to do all that stuff, you need tools.
Yeah.
What tools does a brand need to start thinking about having in place? Because it's now that it's beyond the idea of monitoring, I think the expectation is there's at least some level of monitoring. What does it take to actually listen?
Yeah. So at RDI, we utilize NetBase a lot for our social listening insights, which is a great, very robust and comprehensive tool that allows us not only to gauge what conversations look like, but also the sentiment behind them, geographically where the conversations are located, as well as just digging super deep across competitor research and even getting into some market research to help inform our strategies. So NetBase is a good place to start. It is on the upper end of the price scale. But then you can get into some freer versions of like BuzzSumo, which is a great that's more of a content monitoring social listening tool. So it doesn't give you the exact same information that a NetBase does, where you can actually say someone associated this negative word with my brand, and I can dig into that and figure out ways to combat that in the future. So it's almost like proactive reputation management at that point. BuzzSumo, though, will give you just what content based on network and based on content type is getting the most engagement. So it's kind of like the light version where you can say, all right, I want to do an infographic on financial savings or something of that nature. But you can go into BuzzSumo and even do the free version and say that, oh, no one's engaging with infographics about this specific content, but video is. So then you can start to at least guide your strategy that way. And then on top of that, there's Sprinkler, which is a great social media, not only listening tool, but good reporting tool as well. And that's more of like a day-to-day management of your social media profile tools. But then, the laundry list goes on.
Yeah. There were a couple of things you highlighted there. So recognizing the difference between content types, and that would optimize then from those learnings what effort you're going to put into what types of content. But you also mentioned a little bit earlier, a part of it is the geography. Is I would assume there's differences between what people say in different areas of the country about you. Again, if you're a big enough brand, I think it's probably important that a lot of brands recognize maybe they're so small that segmenting it in these different ways it's not going to tell you a whole lot, because it's just, you don't have that many conversations. But for bigger brands that do have them, when you start to cut this up in different ways, different demographics, different geographies, different content types, what else? What are other kind of ways of cutting this thing?
Oh man. Where does it stop? I guess you can use social listening to not only guide basic market research, so where the conversation's happening, and does it look the same in Indiana as it does in Austin, Texas? Probably not, because those are two wildly different categories of people. That sounded bad. Those are wildly two different audiences. Categories.
Well, yeah.
What do you mean, people?
Yeah.
So, but then cutting it up further from there, you can start to, based on determining content type, ladder that up to like an SEO strategy or a paid media strategy. So if we're seeing that infographics are the best types of content that are getting the engagement as it pertains to a certain industry, we know that inherently that's going to get more backlinks. That's going to get more traffic to site because people are engaging with that content. That can help increase the value of your money keywords or your long tail keywords. So you can start to fuel strategies in that way as well. And And then as it pertains to paid, you can start to take that interactive content types that you've determined to be the most successful and start chopping those up too in different ways to improve quality scores on landing pages, to reduce ad spend, and start to engage with people that way. Because like we said earlier, ads are just ads until they actually like have a human quality to it. And the way to find that human quality is to understand the conversation, and to understand that conversation, you need social listening, because that's where the conversation's happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting in the sense that now that we start to kind of break these things apart and see things in different ways, see people as the people that they are in their different demographics and locations and that kind of stuff, I would imagine then obviously it's informing all the different strategies beyond social. You talked about search, you talked about paid, using that. I mean, this is another plug for, I mean, certainly our perspective of why it's so critical to have all these things integrated. And how all these things can magnify the results in other categories, not just in social performance or something like that. So that being said, and Ali, maybe you can talk from the client's perspective. I mean, what are their expectations? What's a client's expectations, or what should those clients' expectations be for goals as it relates to social listening? What do they hope to see from all of this? Because it can't just be about more likes and more engagement.
Yeah, I think sentiment, I say brand sentiment, but it also can be campaign sentiment, is a big one. When it comes to using social listening, I think going back to like our typical reporting KPI reports where we're looking at, ad spend, impressions, engagement, clicks, all of that, those are great when you're doing a roll up maybe on a monthly basis. But I think understanding real time how people are responding to what you're putting out there allows you to be that much more efficient. So I think that clients should expect that level of, ongoing. I don't want to use the word monitoring because we're kind of using social listening as an opposite of that. But I think having a pulse, I think that's what social listening allows you to do, is have a pulse at any time. And I think we're really starting to incorporate this into any large ongoing campaign, actually large or small, just so that we can have the ability to read our audience and understand how what we're putting out there is resonating with them. Yeah.
And that's what again, the integration. So we've got a campaign going and it's paid, and that was the origination of it, but now using social listening to see the reaction and manage that. I have to think, to bring up kind of such a still famous examples, the Kaepernick stuff with Nike, all that. I mean, social listening had to play a huge role of that while the campaign started, obviously with TV spot and things like that. I mean, I think the campaign lived via social listening and the response to that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I definitely agree that campaign was successful solely because of social. I mean, there was a lot more at play with brand equity and Nike having so much of it.
Yep.
However, when it comes to understanding what that conversation looked like, they took a huge risk with the Kaepernick campaign. And they did so informed because they were understanding what audiences were wanting to see from that brand at that certain time on certain networks. So they strategically placed things, in different areas so that would get the most attention.
Yeah. And you think that came from listening on then the front end before they got to the campaign?
I think there's an element of both. And one of the things in terms of evolution of social content and social listening over the course of the next few years that you're going to see, and this is my opinion, but I'm starting to see it already.
Expert opinion.
Expert opinion, that's true. Is social listening starting to take the place more of market research. And my wife's a market researcher, so don't tell her to listen to this episode. But
it complements
it. It's going to start to add more fuel to the fire that is market research. So a couple episodes back, we talked about how content marketing is going to just be marketing in a couple years because of the breadth of the service, and how it's now we're talking about it leaking into every single offering that RDI has and across the agency. So we're going to start seeing social listening play more of that high-level input from the get-go versus just sort of being that tertiary ask once we already have our audience demographics and that market research focus group type of material established.
Yeah.
So it's going to start to loop into that versus be segmented from
it.
I think to that point on the level of research, market research, I know I've been speaking a lot, and probably in general, we're talking a lot about marketing and campaigns and kind of some of these like bigger programs that brands are running. But I think social listening has legs even outside of marketing specifically.
Yeah.
It's really can be used to inform product. It could be used to inform long-term planning for a company. It could be used to inform, news outlets that they might reach out to from a PR perspective. I think, we're trying to use this as really, it's going back to the pulse of if we know what your consumer is talking about, it might not necessarily always be in response to something you put out there. It could just be about your industry, and having those level of learnings really is going to help you make really smart business decisions. So I think thinking about it bigger than just, marketing, creative, and messaging, it can have some really big impact on a business.
Yeah, we actually did an exercise similar to that as we were recruiting for a new role within RDI. So the marketing team or the content team has been growing pretty exponentially at the agency, and to understand how we actually wanted to attract the right talent, we stocked our job description with insights that we found based on searches in NetBase. So we were able to understand what words people were using when they were searching for certain jobs and plug those in, so we appealed to them before they even had the chance to ask if we had that service or we had that offering.
Sauce.
So,
I
sneaky.
know.
So I love that, because I was at the NetBase conference last week and talking to them about some of the new ways that we're using the tool like that. And I was talking with one of the reps about how they're starting to use the tool for basically conveying very tough news via email internally. So if they can start to understand what the conversation looks like around, something like discussing financials or discussing workforce or something of that nature, they can start to position those conversations to satiate the company internally, while not really having to think externally. But that internal conversation and that positive sentiment that you can garner within turns your employees into advocates. And that in itself is the best type of marketing.
Yeah.
That's all you see from there.
And so we're highlighting a few things that related to one of the questions I did also have was around some of the things that are surprising, right? Because we talked, I think when we first started this, we're talking about, it starts a little bit with monitoring. People are like, what are people saying? And how is that related to the brand? But you now talked about recruiting. We've talked about product development and how it plays a role in that. Developing empathy for our brand, and how, so those things are not, I would say, measurable in this particularly quantifiable sense. I mean, there's probably aspects of it that are. What are, maybe now bringing it back to the metric side of things, if one of our listeners trying to then sell this through, there's going to be the qualitative sense, look at all these different ways this can help us. But then on the quantifiable sense of here's how much a net-base is or something like that, and I need to justify its cost, what metrics do I need to start measuring to be able to start articulating that?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Well, it could be a leap of faith too. I mean, I think that monitoring was a thing that where you could say, hey, we're going to measure this and it can help us increase engagement. Increasing engagement then yields X. But now we're saying we're going to have better products. We're going to recruit better talent. There's so many different ways that this is have a better corporate soul to a degree. So how do you put a price on soul?
Easy.
Easy. So glad you asked.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't there?
You'd never ask. Yeah.
I think there's a song about that, isn't there? So, selling your soul to. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right, yeah. No, that's a good question, and I think from a service level standpoint and sort of understanding the value of a tool like a NetBase being so expensive is in the power to get it in front of more people so they understand the importance of it
within the organization.
So Allie and I have recently worked together on a client that hadn't switched up their retainer in quite some time, and what we were able to do with the tool at our disposal was show them all these conversations that were happening that based on market research, we weren't able to show them, based on just sort of ideas and concepts, we weren't able to show them. But when we actually got into the tool and showed them proof of concept, we were able to increase that business. So I think right there, you're already conveying to other stakeholders in the company that this tool has power, or a tool like it has power enough to increase your business and your bottom line. And then outside of that, if you can start to, like I said, get it in front of more people internally, not just the people that are going to help you sell it to other clients, but also to your other department heads, like your SEO managers or your paid media directors or whoever it might be, and start to educate them on the value, and then start to correlate, like we talked about earlier, those long tail keywords starting to rank on page 1 versus page 6. You're going to get that buy-in more people you have using a tool for the same fixed cost,
Yep.
the better the tool is going to be, because the better the insights that you're all going to be able to pull out of that, and the data that you're going to get, because everyone looks at it different ways.
Yeah.
I think even taking that a step further, trying to get into KPIs, because that's at the end of the day, our clients want to know ROI. They want to know, why should I invest in this or in a tool like this? It's hard to say one thing, but I think when you look at, like, on a campaign level, you can start to look at, I mean, the idea is, if you're understanding your audience, that means you're developing a more relevant message and you're hitting the right people at the right time with the right piece of content. So ideally, your media you should be seeing tremendous efficiencies in your media spend. So it is a little bit of an indirect connection, and it's hard to say one for one, but ideally, if you're, having that level of oversight, of your, or just understanding, I think you're developing more informed content to reach your audience. So you can say, like, that's return on ad spend and things like that. I ideally would get more efficient. You can then start to go to other segments of the business. When it comes to hiring, companies spend so much money. It's so expensive to have to bring a new employee on board. Anything to streamline that process, making sure that you're finding the best candidate on the other end, because you're understanding what those people are looking for. You're streamlining that process, so you're finding efficiencies internally there. It goes on, and it's, again, I think it's sometimes probably a little bit longer timeline. That might not be like in a matter of a month to month you're seeing a lift, or you're seeing, cost efficiencies. But I think in the long term, we can really start to track that, and I would love to be able to start doing that. I think, for clients.
Well, and that's why I think that in my opinion, the chief marketing officer or VP marketing, whoever's leading marketing, or even the CEO level, why this oversight needs to happen, because what you're saying is, content influences search media, but you're going to create efficiency over in the media spend, all these different areas. But if you're siloed in, hey, that's a social thing, or hey, that's, you're effectively, your team is search's best friend, or, paid media's best friend, because you're saying this is working, change this, that sort of thing. So if the integration isn't there, you're not going to see the financial results. Typically, you'll maybe be able to pull some stuff out, say, hey guys, look at this, but at that point you're just beating a drum. You're saying, hey guys, please look over here. Whereas if there's true integration, people believe in this idea, you're going to see the benefits in a lot of different places.
Yeah. So I guess we need to talk about changing my business card from manager to everyone's best
friend. I love it. So any final examples as we wrap this episode up of just, some really cool things that people, you talked about application in careers or anything like that?
So a couple of years back, we have one of our clients is a major shoe brand, and something happened with a little bit of controversy online. I know.
Oh my God, that happens? Oh,
exactly. And a rapper who shall not be named mentioned that there was going to be a collaboration with a shoe brand. And at the time, he was in a lot of hot water. And so the backlash was just extreme. Like, why would this brand do this with this person after everything that's been going on? And, I can't believe, I thought they were at least somewhat ethical. So we were able to pretty much nip that in the bud pretty quick by identifying the conversation first and foremost, but then taking it one step further. So this is where that proactive reputation management comes into play that I was talking about earlier, in the sense that we were able to understand the conversations happening by the people that were making the most noise prior to and after the whole incident went down. And so we were able to start speaking their language versus just saying sorry.
Right.
Because once you say sorry, the 24-hour news cycle starts over again. It's like apology issued, like things of that nature. So you have to just kind of jump in front of it in that way. But we're able to also like jump behind it a little bit too, and say that like we already took care of the front end. Now we're just taking care of the back end. Because of the conversation, we were able to like reverse engineer, I guess, as it were. So that was an interesting example.
Yeah.
For sure. That was like late night or two.
Yeah. And I would imagine, I mean, it's just, that's not like what everyone is going to deal with on a day-to-day basis. That's a pretty unique circumstance. But what the kind of takeaways of all of that is just recognizing speaking people's language helps them kind of probably diffuse hot situations. So that's particularly powerful. And
yeah, on that note of any kind of major PR moment that a company might have, I think, after it happens, most companies are jumping into gear, getting PR teams on it, having responses, having social involved, all of that. I think what's also most important is that you're tracking the long-term impact coming off of that, and is the work that you're doing to repair the image working, and are you kind of gaining back some of those people that you might have lost as fans during that time? So I think that's probably another great opportunity, really, in terms of partnering with PR to say, it really, social listening does kind of is an element of PR. You can really start to look at that, of saying, is this working? How is our audience feeling about us? What is that? How do they feel about our company? Do we still have a lot of enemies? Are they not happy with us? Or is the repair that we're doing working, and are we winning them back?
Yeah, and that's true public relations, and I think that's what that industry has struggled a little bit with. Was it used to be the press release machine, and now it's actually getting back to probably what the original intent was having positive relations with the public. So
social media is the new press release.
It is. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. It's a fantastic conversation. For our listeners, be sure to check out show notes from this episode and more at reddoor.biz/learn. And as always, subscribe to the Marketing Remix and leave us a review on iTunes. So again, thanks for joining us, Allie, Will, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks.